You can still use Slido as the way to ask questions. The first part of the discussion panel will be done by me, so I'll be asking questions, but then it will be up to you. So the questions will be from the audience. And then we will have a game at the end with some cool prizes, so please listen to this panel. And yeah, then we'll have food and networking and drinks and stuff. Alright, so I guess let's start with a quick question to you, three of you guys, if you can briefly introduce yourself, your background, so the audience can understand better. My name is Chris, I will start with myself. My name is Chris, I do run a company that helps early stage founders to raise capital with a software component built-in. It's the company name is Skygate. So I help startups succeed, hopefully, and do also running our own. We're using machine learning in some of our projects. And yeah, that's mostly about me. So let's start with Peter and we'll move forward.
Okay, so I work in quantum computation for already 80 years almost. And now the field of quantum machine learning is emerging. It's pretty active nowadays, with new companies popping up and the entire field going outside from academia to businesses. It is not applicable yet, but of course with the development of new quantum computers and new techniques, we believe that this quantum machine learning might be something hot in like maybe a few years. That's my business. And
just one thing, Piotr is from Gliwice and he's pretty cool, so you can find him pretty often. I hope he will be often guest in our meetups. Okay, Tomasz, so how about you?
So my name is Tomek, I'm working at Infermedica, which is a healthcare startup based in Wrocław. We are building a symptom checker. So whenever you're feeling sick, you can visit our website or application and submit your symptoms, and we will have like a virtual conversation with you, like you would have with the doctor, and we will try to identify the conditions that you have and how serious it is. So we are basically applying data science in the healthcare field. I used to study computer science at this university. This is my first chance to be on the other side of the room, and I'm pretty excited.
Thank you. So Vadim, how about you? We know a little bit about yourself, but you can now plug more.
I have some diverse backgrounds. I studied as a computer scientist, I would say comparative technology scientist, and I switched to machine learning back in 2012. So, what can I say about our company? Well, we write papers, scientific ones, so we go to conferences, and we work with machine learning and source code, pretty much all the aspects of it. However, currently the money I made not with ML code exactly, but let's say more straightforward things. Just by providing the tools to query source code. Turned out that before tackling the problem with machine learning, we first try to do simpler methods first. So yeah, this is it.
And SourceDeed, as far as I remember, the company is headquartered in Silicon Valley, right? But you work from office in Madrid, so the team is pretty international. And so how big is the team right now?
We have two headquarters in Madrid and San Francisco. So the, let's say, unique thing about SourceDeed is that we are very transparent, and pretty much everything about how the company works is on GitHub, on a public one, so we can go to a repository and read how we hire people or how we work. Pretty much everything except the salaries, because it's prohibited by law, sorry about that. However, everybody inside the company knows the salaries for all the grades. We are also remote first, so we are allowed to work from everywhere in the world. There is a problem with time zones, of course, but we successfully solved it for now. We have people from all countries in Europe, from Poland actually too. We have 2 employees from Poland, from Spain, from Portugal, from France, from Russia, from Belarus, from Italy, yeah. And also from the other side of the globe, we have a few people working in the US. I would say that the San Francisco headquarters is more sales oriented, and the big headquarters is more engineering oriented.
Okay, so speaking about foreign countries and Spain and remote work, I guess most of our guests today are students because it's summer, so they have nothing else to do as coming to university and listen lectures in the afternoon. So maybe you can, let's switch more towards starting a career. So being a student first and then start getting first job in machine learning. So how it looked in your case, how you started, what was the most difficult subject at your university maybe, and why it matters when starting career in machine learning and data science?
So I didn't study for a machine learning profession. So as I said, I used to be a compiler technology guy. So I entered Samsung. Samsung deals with pretty much diverse hardware, TV sets, mobile phones, everything. So I joined Samsung in Moscow as a compiler and hardware guy. So surprisingly, in a few months, I ended up in a team which actually did machine learning, and it was interesting, so I tried to do that. And in my university, I studied a lot of math. I didn't really understand why I should learn math back then. It was quite boring for me. I would rather write some source code. But later in Samsung, I remembered all my math skills for now, and I was quite happy that I did study that. So probably the advice is, if you don't understand as the point of a subject right now, you think that it's boring or pointless or you don't like it, probably you still force yourself to learn it. Maybe not to full extent, but to 80 or 70%. So that in the future, if one day you end up switching your job for whatever reason, you get easier time just refreshing all your knowledge and understanding the basics and the core parts of the subject.
I remember from school that, I would say it differently. In Poland, I think we had a lot of Russian mathematical books being translated into Polish, so Russian math school is pretty strong. So do you think that helps? This background helps when looking for machine learning and data science job?
Yeah, definitely, it helps a lot because you know about Kaggle. So Kaggle is a huge platform where you can compete with people all over the globe solving a machine learning problem or data science. So if you look at the leaderboard, you'll see a lot of people from, let's say, countries, and these people, they don't really understand much of the subject. They don't understand how the core works. They don't understand, let's say, the roots of the problem. This is why you have to study math. You have to study all these boring things so that you understand the mechanics of machine learning and data science. It's pretty obvious. Let's say the truth, right? You can download pretty much every model for deep learning from GitHub, run it, maybe polish something, and it will work. And you'll get things done. But you will have no idea how does it work inside, right? So your, let's say, differentiation point, right? Your core strengths should be understanding of how everything works inside, and not just script kidding when you just download something from GitHub, running it, and that's it. Hence that.
A quick question: you worked for Samsung. You worked you get this Google developer expert, and now you work with Source.t, so pretty large companies. Have you worked with smaller companies in your work history, or typically you feel good working for larger, already established teams?
So currently I feel more comfortable in a startup. When I graduated from the university, I was quite hyped. Let's be straight. Everybody knows about Google, about Facebook, about all these big shiny companies which you can enter and try to build your career there, and you can, in theory at least, make a lot of money from that. I know Google pays a lot of money, so it sounded so nice to me. So I tried my best to enter one of these big companies. I landed in Samsung. Doesn't really matter that much which company I landed in. It was a big enterprise. So I spent there a few years, maybe 3 years, 4 years. And then I started to see weird things which typically happen in a big company. How things are sometimes solved completely in an optimal way, or how communication really strikes you, how different departments compete with each other. You know, all these corporate flows which you don't see at first when you are just a freshly graduate. So I decided to try something different. You know, work on things which I want and working on things which somebody tells me. So I ended at Sourcet just because I did exactly what I wanted to do myself, and I wanted to found a startup exactly about that. And you know, it would be quite meaningful to join another companies and trying to do their own and compete. And it was a good decision because I'm a technical guy. I'm not so good at, you know, running a product, managing people. Well, I guess I got better in that, but back then I had no idea how it works. If you're from a startup, you have to do so many things which are not really what you're used to do. This is like 5% coding and 95% other things. You're not really interested in it. So it was quite natural for me to join Sourcet.
Okay. So from a large company then to a startup, so we can move to back to Tomasz. So how it was in your case? So what is your, you mentioned you studied here. It was computer science, right? Or okay. And how your career developed over time, and how are you using this background in the current startup you're working with?
So I would say it was pretty similar because I always liked math, but I wanted to make it a bit more practical. That's why I studied computer science. And during my studies, I had an internship at a bank. We had been building a customer intelligence platform on Hadoop, which was a very hot topic back then. And that was for me really interesting, and I wanted to learn a bit more about the business side of the things that I was working on. So I did a postgraduate management studies, and data science is a field where you can very nicely combine those two worlds, the business side and the technical side. And then I got an internship at Procter & Gamble, which is a company that owns Pampers or Gillette. We've been doing demand forecasting over there. Later on, I landed at a McKinsey company, which is a consulting company, also pretty big. And we've been doing a lot of different projects, always related to data science. I was in the marketing and sales practice, so topics around pricing or churn prediction for very various industries like automotive, retail, fashion, FMCG. The best part over there was that I get a chance to learn a lot of different techniques and apply them to real world problems. And that's also, I think, something that you can learn at the university, even if you at first don't believe that this is useful. You never know on what kind of projects it will spark some idea or will be actually a good method or model to apply to a very specific problem. And then I moved to the startup world where we are trying to improve the healthcare systems.
And do you think the learning curve is better in a startup or in a large corp, or it's just different shape of this learning curve? Or what are your thoughts, and how much of maths basics are you using in larger company versus startup?
I would say it hugely depends. It depends on the team, on the company, on the stuff that you are working on. At a large company, especially when you're starting, you can get a lot of training from more senior colleagues, especially if there are some kind of established programs that helps develop junior people. And this is great. This is something that you don't always have time on startup. So in a startup. So there are times that you have to just get job done, and a lot of stuff is going on at the startup, and there's sometimes hard to find time to get guidance from more senior colleagues or something like this.
And what is your current responsibility in the startup? Is that machine learning related in any sort, or it's something totally different right now?
So I manage a team of data scientists. I don't code almost, maybe 5% of my time. But fortunately, I'm also doing a PhD here at this university, so in the evening sometimes or during the weekends I can still code. So my job currently is more like a product management, project management over the stuff that we are working in our team.
But it's a technical role, right? So you're managing the data science teams.
Yes.
They ask you many questions, you need to develop.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, so we have also Peter. Peter background is...
I'm from here.
Yeah, he's from here. You're not 100% AI, it's more quantum. So maybe you can tell a bit more about this and how, from your perspective, what you learn in university can be applied in your daily job.
Okay, so what I learned at this department, it was completely irrelevant, apart of algebra and analysis, of course, to my job, because quantum computation in 2001 was pretty hot topic. I mean, new topic, of course. So, only basic mathematics was interesting, and maybe some elementary computer science like Carnot maths and how the logic circuits work and this kind of stuff was kind of interesting and useful for me. But I had to learn most of this thing, not alone, but with my colleagues. So, of course, quantum computation at the time was pretty new, and there were no courses on this subject anywhere in Poland, I believe. Maybe in Gdańsk and Toronto. And it was new. Nowadays, of course, there are courses on quantum computation are available in various places. For example, AGH students, computer science students, have to take a half-year course on quantum computation nowadays. And I believe it's pretty kind of popular with them, because they have to learn basic maths, they have to revise linear algebra, learn a little bit more about some particular aspects of linear algebra, which are very useful then, for example, in machine learning. Because the mathematics behind quantum computation, quantum information theory, and machine learning is very similar. And a lot of techniques from this field is now applied in machine learning too. Not even in the terms that we want to program a quantum computer to do something useful for us, but we take models, physical models that we develop for quantum information theory, and then apply them in machine learning. One of such examples is tensor networks, which was probably developed only in quantum information theory, like as a main tool. It was one of the main tools for this field. And then now there are more and more examples showing that it's a useful tool for various aspects of machine learning. So my message would be learn as much math as you can, look into physics, because machine learning, a lot of ansatz, so basically educated guesses, is taken from physics. And physicists done a lot of work in history. So, of course, maths is very popular, but physics is not so popular anymore in Poland. It's a huge problem because while studying physics and solving physics problem, then you learn how to solve problems that are useful outside of just very field of physics. And we can see that in our team, we have many physicists, we have mathematicians, and nobody apart me from this department. So what I did, I went to the mathematics department, take a couple of courses there, kind of illegally, but the dean was okay with that, was fine with that. And it helped me a lot. So if you can look for new ways to learn mathematics, either online or locally, do it. Physics, same. Unfortunately, the physics department doesn't exist here, and there's only this small institute. But yeah, you should look into mathematics and physics outside of this building if you want to learn something useful. Because here you will learn engineering, so how to make the stuff done using your tools. That was very useful, but it's not enough for advanced fields such as quantum computation, quantum machine learning, and machine learning in general.
Yeah, from my experience, I remember passing the physics course was pretty tough, and I think some of you guys can also agree on that. But another thought I had is basically it's more or less fair to say you're 10, maybe 15, something between 10 to 15 years after study. So also the technology these days has changed, right? And mathematics and physics hasn't changed, like maybe slightly. There are some discoveries, but the rules are similar. But the advance is pretty fast. So people on this audience, they are starting their career right now. So we don't know what actually will happen in this 10 to 15 years. But from what you're saying, it's better to learn the basics than to learn the tools, because tools will change, technology will be different. And actually, this is the first time we have a quantum computing practitioner in our events. Like before, we used to have only artificial intelligence, machine learning engineers and practitioners. So how do you apply what you learn in your daily job? Do you run a team? Do you do your research on your own, or it's like a mix of that?
Okay, so I'm a member of a team, and the team is very egalitarian, so we basically find out our ideas. We discuss our ideas, we do whatever we want, basically, and so it's very like leveled, and of course, I mean, we direct the students, but the students have freedom to choose what they want to do, mostly. And so I mostly do research, so I look at problems and try to solve them in various ways. Nowadays, for example, using neural networks, because I want to learn more about it. And I try to learn as much as possible. So basically, I try to look into different fields and find the common ground between them, which is fun. I also had to learn on my own tools. So Git, it's a basic tool you have to use. Python, for me, Julia as a programming language, and LaTeX, of course, and nowadays VS Code, and how to use GPU, and so that those are my tools of the trade, a part of theoretical tools of mathematics and physics. But of course, what I do mostly, I work with models. So we have abstract ideas that we map into different abstract ideas, and we want to find the connections between them. Because I'm trained software engineer, so I write these ideas into code, do some simulations, try to compare the results of the simulations various ways, and that's what I do basically. Nowadays, of course, we have access to quantum computers, which is nice. They are very, very messy, and they are not of good quality yet, and we believe that in some future they might be way better. But it's fun, of course. It's fun to have access to quantum computers and to do some kind of real real life job. And now I try to, because of my friends here from the multimedia group, I try to work on the processing about hyperspectral images using the D-Wave machine, which is one of the subjects I do. Other subject is how to simulate dynamical systems using D-Wave. And would like to look more into neural networks that use existing non-D-Wave machines, let's say, which are IBM or Rigetti machines. So this kind of stuff is very interesting. Unfortunately, there's very little, like nobody needs this our work here in Poland. There is only one enterprise working quantum computation. There's another one, there was a startup, but it's already gone. Yeah, so there's only one operating in Krakow, but they have very specific goal and they know what to achieve. And so there's like, the problem is that Polish enterprises don't really know anything about quantum computation. There were some inquiries about applications, and we're trying to cooperate with some enterprises in order to give them, at least assess whether their problem might be solved, at least in theory, better using quantum computers, which is something very new for me, because for so many years we are just completely theoreticians working very theoretical stuff that nobody cared about. Now, because of IBM and then Google and all these huge companies investing in quantum computation, the buzz is, the hype is going up. There's a more buzz, and maybe something will be done in a couple of years that is useful, and that cannot be done using classical computers.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting actually, because it looks like the trends that started, the hype and the higher popularity around machine learning started maybe 10, maybe 5 years ago, and now more or less makes sense to say that. And there are some trends around quantum computing right now, that actually this can be like work for you guys in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, what's from your perspective, how it look in Poland, like quantum computing in Poland 10, 15, 20 years ago, and how did it change from there to now? And what is your prediction? Is quantum computing a hype? Is that a real thing? Is that is that already solving important problems, and will that be solving important problems in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Okay, it is a hype, but first of all, there's a couple of cases. Okay, there's huge hype, and if you read popular press or even technical press talking about quantum computation, stop it. It's useless. There's too much noise. People don't understand what's going on, and it's completely useless for even for me. I don't understand this kind of articles because they are plainly stupid. Mostly, of course. Of course, we know. Okay, if we had a huge quantum computer, which we don't know how to build, we can break all existing encryption systems, symmetric and asymmetric encryption systems. So it's huge. The result of Peter Shaw, the factorization algorithm, that shows that we can break current encryption with quantum computers. So that's one example of very useful and very scary outcome that came from quantum computation idea. We can build a system that is, the humanity, basically, or Google, can build a system that is way too small to achieve anything useful. Apart of that, we are trying to use these small computers, very tiny, very limited computers, that can run very short programs in a coherent way for doing something useful. One of these kind of applications is machine learning. It's fun. It's mostly made just for, to show that something is possible. One application that might be useful is quantum chemistry, because it is difficult to simulate a molecule in a computer because it's a quantum mechanical system. But then if you have a quantum mechanical system, which is a quantum computer, you can simulate this molecule, at least to some extent, and look for useful properties of a molecule. So quantum chemistry with quantum computation is a thing. It is, in my opinion, the first application that will be useful and successful, and there are very clever people working in this field. The other applications and new-time applications, we don't really know. It's always a hard competition, and people are looking for a single problem in which we could show that the existing quantum computer is better than any existing classical computer. It might be achieved in a couple of years, but we don't know. Okay, regarding the history, so 20 years ago, there were only physicists working in quantum information theory, actually. So extension of Shannon theory to quantum world. And quantum computing was virtually unknown in Poland. A part of the fact that Professor Węgrzyn, the person that basically initiated this building, this entire department, had this idea that, yeah, we should look into that, into quantum computation. So I started in 2001. In 1999, I believe 1990, we started to look at it like exactly 20 years ago. I started in 2001 when we didn't know what we were doing at all. I was still a student, and I started with my friend that was at the time physics student. So there was a very small group of basically three of us with a professor. Yeah, it was a very small field, but nowadays we are like 12 people. And some people are going out into industry because there is some skills we learn during our research are now required in the industry. One example would be classical annealers. So there's this D-wave machine, which is a quantum annealer, which is a particular form of computer. But also people are looking into classical annealers, which are new machines, which are just silicon-based devices that solve particle optimization problems. And because they solve the same problem as a D-wave machine, which is one example of a quantum computer, very limited one. So one of my colleagues moved to Fujitsu now in order to develop a programming language for these new classical annealers. Or quantum doesn't really matter because the interface between quantum and for classical quantum annealers is the same. So the times are changing. 10 years ago, nobody believed that the quantum computer would be built. 5 years ago, yeah, it was probably likely. And of course, huge difference was in 2006 or 7 when IBM opened their own computer and allowed people from outside to use their quantum machine. At the time, only 5 qubits. For me, it was huge. I mean, it was the first device I could access because, of course, I mean, in Poland, there is no. Okay, in Poland we don't have any quantum computers, of course. We have some companies developing components for quantum computers, which is interesting. In Europe, there are no publicly available quantum computers. One computer, I believe, is in Cambridge, and there is some attempts to build one. Basically, it's built, but it's not really accessible in Innsbruck, in Austria. And now the European Union is trying to put money into construction of first proper quantum computer in Germany with Sweden, but it's a difficult task and nobody knows whether it will succeed. So, of course, in Poland it's difficult to do. It was difficult at the time, like 10 years ago, to do any quantum computation. Now it's slightly better because we can access them remotely. But of course, the Silicon or Quantum Valley is being constructed in Silicon Valley, but also in Toronto. So Canada is a huge player, and unfortunately, and of course China. China does a lot. They have their own quantum computer. Alibaba invested a lot in quantum computation already. And Europe is slightly behind, I believe. Not in terms of theory, but in terms of practice and building machines and applying and running them. It's pretty sad what's going here. I mean, maybe we'll be able to move forward, But even Airbus is using American and Canadian companies to build a quantum software for them.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting, and I guess that subject requires probably a couple of presentations, I guess. So that's coming, and it sounds like there is huge future standing in front of those who are in quantum computing. How about, Tomasz, your opinion on machine learning? Was that a hype? Is that a hype? Is that going to be there in next 20 years? And what will be the world look like in 10 or 20 years? How world will look like when more and more machine learning is being applied to the real industry?
So I think machine learning was a hype, is a hype, and probably will be for some time here. Interesting things that I noticed is that usually on more technical conferences, machine learning is used, and on more like a business-related conferences, artificial intelligence term is used for describing the same thing, basically. If you ask me how the work will look like in, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, it's probably hard to predict. Recently I was on conferences that the person described that currently it's studying STEM, so science, technical, mathematics stuff is a hot thing and the best probably choice. But in the future, probably nearer than we think, it will be better to study some human sciences or philosophy or stuff like this, because a lot of the things will be automated. And probably it could happen, but whether it will happen in 20 years or 50 years, it's hard to predict.
And do you think it's possible, like there is this discussion, which job will be replaced in how many years from now? There is, of course, automated autopilot in cars like coming soon. Do you think from a software engineering perspective it's possible to be afraid of AI in terms of part of our job, how a work of software engineer looks today? Are there parts that you see easily to be automated in the next 5, 10 or 20 years?
I think some part of our work will be automated, but the discussion shouldn't be about who will lose the job, but rather what kind of jobs will be created.
Okay. So what kind of jobs will be created from your perspective?
It's also hard to predict.
Okay.
But for example, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 years ago, the term data scientist didn't even exist, and right now we don't have enough of them. And probably some other roles or jobs will emerge pretty soon. Another very important topic for data science or for machine learning is how do we acquire data, how do we label the data. So a lot of the investment and work goes into preparing data for the model. So a lot of people at Uber or Google are actually, for example, looking at pictures and labeling them so that the model can train on the best possible data there is. And those kind of roles, they also didn't exist. But what other types of jobs will be created, it's probably hard to predict. I mean, I wouldn't dare to.
Because you work in a startup, there is a lot of discussion around investors, specifically investing in those startups who have AI component built in that startup, and there is a bunch of controversy around it because there's research that 40% of these AI startups has nothing in common with AI actually. But the question is, why do you think investors and private capital is really moving towards AI? Why do you think it's a good way to invest money, and why it's so popular, why there's so much discussion happening around these types of startups that have this?
So I think there's a correlation about how much money can you raise and whether do you have AI in your pitch deck?
Yeah.
So this definitely helps. This is probably the reason why founders are actually putting those buzzwords in the slides. The reason why investors are looking for such investments is probably that with that kind of technology you can very easily scale, and if you are able to automate some part of the jobs or some tasks that are currently very time consuming to do, then you can generate either cost savings or increase the top line revenue. And this is, if you do it automatically, which AI usually enables, then you can scale really, really quickly. And this is what investors are actually looking for. They are not looking for, some small organic growth. They are looking for 10x investments.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, Vadim, question to you, because you're working right now in a startup that basically focuses around code itself, like a source code, and thanks to GitHub and a lot of public repositories, we have access to a huge amount of data actually, and our code is pretty, in most cases, it should be well structured. So this data I don't need, or I'm not sure if we need to clean it a lot, or it's already well structured from your perspective, but what do you think can happen in the next 5, 10 or 15 years based on application of what you actually are building towards the code? Will the job of software engineer will be automated, and what do you think will happen in like the next phase?
So definitely software engineers are here to stay, and nobody's going to replace them with AI. For now it's completely fantastic and we can relax. So what I remember is a book by Peter Thiel. It's named From Zero to One, and it's quite a good book about startupping in general. If you didn't read it, please do it. It's very interesting. So one of the ideas in the book was that how would you look at the AI and machine learning? So like, will it like completely replace the job, or will it do something else? And it appears that no, it actually helps you to do the same things but in a more effective way and achieve the same but in less cost, or achieve more with the same cost, like I said before. So in this case, if you look at the software engineering, you can apply machine learning to do exactly that. You can be more productive with the things which can be written in the next 5 to 15 years. In some cases, some parts of software engineering, I guess, can be automated. I know that there is a nice experiment with turning screenshots of smartphone applications into source code which describes them. It was named Pix2 code or something like that. So in some very specific parts, I guess you can generate code automatically, but that's it. The rest will be just providing you assistance so that you can code better. Currently, just to give you an example, there are many best practices how you should write in any language, but take some effort to follow these practices, especially for newcomers who do not know about them, just don't have the resources to study. So there could be an assistant which actually mines from the open source code on GitHub what are the best practices, which projects leverage them, and recommends you that. You could take all open source tools written by Google, for example, and find some common laws in how Google develops software and apply it to your case. So instead of reading how Google style guide works, you will just get your code automatically following it thanks to the things developed.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. So the robot will automatically improve the code quality for us, and we can focus on more abstract things. Okay, so I guess right now it's time to look at the questions that we have in here. So first question, the top one. First, of you guys who want to answer, just let me know. Do you sometimes sell a bunch of manually defined if statements as AI solution. Yeah, I guess there are memes that actually AI is a big bucket of if statements, but the question is around if they are manually defined.
Well, we can remember chatbots, for example. I have a friend who is working in a company which produces chatbots, and he said exactly that. So they have nice buzzwords on their website that they're doing AI, but what they actually do is a bunch of if statements selling as an AI solution as a chatbot.
Yeah, manually, the important word is manually here, I guess. So you're saying it's happening, right? So people are doing that already. So maybe Tomasz, the second question for you. How popular machine learning was around your friends from your year group at university? So I guess when you were a student, if any, how many of them ended working with machine learning today?
So when I was studying, we didn't even have a machine learning subject or data science subject. So we rather have stuff that was going around that topic, but it wasn't labeled like this, and sometimes we didn't even realize that we are doing data science. Most of my colleagues were rather interested in software engineering, and they ended up over there. I have a couple of them that are working more on the machine learning projects, but I could probably count them on one hand, to be honest.
So to go deeper into this question, what do you think is more likely to happen, or what is easier over time? To start as as you did, right? You did PhD, and that was related to machine learning. So is it more likely to happen that once you start more scientifically approach, so you put more energy into maths, into physics, into hard and boring stuff, then you will later on end up in interesting projects like the one you're working with, or it's more likely to just go with everybody else, do software engineering, and then from there start to learn machine learning? What is more likely to happen from your perspective?
I think it rather depends on the personality and preferences, but I can say from my perspective or from my experiences that people who studied computer science and then turn into machine learning or data science, they typically have a better, let's say, coding style or better computer science skills and more like trying and doing approach, more engineering approach, let's say like this. And people after, let's say, mathematical studies, they are very often extremely strong on the statistics, on the mathematics, but their code sometimes is not so well written. But in data science, it's such a broad field that you can have people from different backgrounds and exchanging ideas, exchanging experiences, and a person who doesn't have such a great computer science skill can be a great problem solver, can suggest a very good prototype model that could later on be implemented by a person who knows how to code more efficiently. So I think there is a place for everyone. It doesn't matter that much what kind of studies did you choose after your college. It's rather what you would like to do. If you find some interesting topic, just go with the flow, try to learn how to solve it with some kind of machine learning if that's applicable. And there are also a lot of people going into data science or machine learning apart from either computer science or mathematics. So it's rather, like for example, in our team we have a doctor that learned how to code. And another one is will be joining us next month. So it's possible to learn. It just if you feel that this is the right place for you, if you like that kind of problems, just try and learn.
So the common denominator is curiosity, right? You need to stay curious and keep on learning. I guess we have a great, there used to be, question for Peter. What reliable books, other sources which you recommend on the topic of quantum computing?
Okay, so one of this answer would be the original comic book that I made with my two of my colleagues. It's free, available online. It's a comic book with a very elementary mathematical introduction to quantum computation at the end. So it's like 50 pages of mathematics you have to understand in order to understand the basis of quantum computation. It starts with matrices and complex numbers, so it's really it should be easy to understand for an engineering student. It is written in Polish, so the title is Ewolucja stanu, and you can find it on Sion repository now.
We'll share the link on Meetup. So
yeah, so that's one. That was exactly for that. I mean, it was created in order to entertain you because there is a story. There is and in order to understand the story, you have to understand the concept of quantum teleportation. And in order to understand quantum teleportation, you have to learn to understand mathematics and physics behind. So that was the idea. It was created like 3 or 4 years ago, supported by the Foundation for Polish Science. So that would be, I already prepared myself for this question pretty well. Other books, they are available in various places. If you have more engineering approach, dive into libraries that are available from, for example, IBM, Rigetti, or Google, that allow you to build your own, or Microsoft, it's in C# or whatever. Q#, it's called Q#. I mean, that's probably very complicated, I don't know. The other libraries are in Python. And you can try to play with these libraries and to at least look how it works. You will not understand how it works without understanding mathematics. But it is fun to play and to learn the concepts, the language behind, and then you have to look into something more appropriate. The book that I like a lot is by David McMahon, I believe, Introduction to Quantum Computation. It's very elementary, but it is therefore it is very good for beginners. It's a really nice one. And of course, the Holy Bible is by Nielsen and Chuang. It is Quantum Computation, Quantum Information, that is the title. I mean, it's a Holy Bible. It's a basic book for the students. Nielsen moved now into machine learning. So he wrote also a very good book on neural networks. So that's interesting. And that's a trend. Some people are moving from quantum computation to machine learning. I don't know really why, but that's an interesting trend. It's happening now. But if you want to learn more, you can ask me afterwards. I can point you to various sources because it's my life, basically.
yeah, I will just contact you and we'll try to collect as many links, useful links as possible, and put them on Meetup. So I guess we will have time for 2 more questions, and then we'll just switch to networking mode. So Tomasz, first machine learning or data science job at big company corporation versus small company startup. So I guess the question is about the first job. What is better, to start with big or to start with a small company, from your perspective?
It depends, I would say. What I would look for in the first job is to join an interesting company with interesting problem that they're trying to solve, and check whether you like the people that you have the interviews, because those are the people that you will spend most of the time. But if I had to choose, I wouldn't recommend. I mean, it depends. Hugely depends on the person. So I don't want to be the one.
You can be as subjective as you want. It's like your opinion. And
I would probably, if I wouldn't study heavily data science, if such let's say, specialty would exist, then I would start probably in a big corporation because they can invest a lot in the trainings. And you can learn from much broader peer group and more senior people because startups tends to be small.
There is a funny story about a guy who, I think he invented Google Street View, some plugin to Gmail, and one more thing that Google required. So he was working for Google at first, then he quit his job, he started a startup, ended up being Street View, so Google acquired his company, and he needed to work for 3 years to implement it with Google Maps. Then he quit again, he started another startup, then Google acquired it again. So maybe that's a trend, like a sinusoid. Okay, but there are good and bad parts of working with big and small companies, so you need to pick your preferences. And I think the last question for Vadim, about domain knowledge. So domain knowledge is essential in many AI problems. Is it easier to teach data science to a doctor or to teach a data science expert about medicine, communication? I guess Tomasz, you can also help, Vadim, but if we skip the medicine and think of any domain, what do you think it's easier to go from data science to domain, or to go from domain to data science, from your perspective?
So I can remember a similar question, but just about software engineering in general, because especially for outsourcers, it's quite common that you come to an enterprise, you ask everybody about the problems, then you design the system, you write this system, engineer it, and deploy it. And while you are working on this system, you actually have to understand all the domain problems as particular enterprise has. But it doesn't go another way around, right? The enterprise doesn't teach their domain experts coding, and then, they don't do it like that. They hire professionals which can write it. So I guess here it's quite the same. So if you have a doctor, I doubt that a doctor will switch to software engineering or to machine learning to automate the work. I don't know any, cases when it happened. I guess it still can be possible, but it's really, really uncommon. However, if you take a data science experts and try to make them solve the main problem, they will have to understand the data. If you don't understand the data, you cannot solve the problem. So they have to become, I can't say really the main experts, but at least have some understanding of what's happening inside. And they always can use people who are experts as a reference, so they can ask questions and they can be led. They don't have to do everything on their own. So I guess it's easier to teach a data science expert about, not medicine. Medicine is a huge topic.
Yeah, that was a tricky question if you consider how complicated a medicine is. And I think there are two extreme situations to consider. So on one hand, people might be afraid if they want to be a data scientist, and the amount of energy and time and research they need to spend teaching themselves a domain can be in some cases not interesting for them, because they want to develop their career as data scientists, and if they spend, 90% of time into domain, just 10 or 5% into coding, they cannot even think of themselves as engineers anymore. But on the opposite side, I think if someone is really like pure developer, don't want to learn anything about domain, I think it's what Peter mentioned about his comic. It's just easier to learn stuff when you have this soft component around it, right? Why actually you're writing the code? What kind of problem you can solve with the tools that you have, right? If you just blindly focus on the tool and don't think of the real life problem, then you end up being just extreme theoretician and maybe there are some benefits of that, but the balance is in between, right? So we need to. So how much time do you think it's good enough, or it's win-win when you need to learn domain? But when do you think people can feel it's too much, and when do you think it's not enough? So what is your kind of golden advice for finding this balance between spending time teaching yourself domain and spending time just becoming a better engineer? It's like 50-50, or it's 1 day domain, 4 days developing your engineering skills, or?
I would say as much as the business requires. So, well, of course you can do it on your own if you're interested, but if you are working in a company is a commercial enterprise, right? So they need to make money, and you have KPIs, you have goals, you have planning, and well, basically, as soon as you see that you are able to fulfill all the tasks the business comes to you with reasonable time, with reasonable quality, well, probably that's kind of fine. I'm not saying that you should really stop doing that if you like it, but well, if you see, let's say, too little outcome for too much effort, that's probably a good time to stop.
Cool. All right. So I guess that's most of what we have for our discussion panel. And right now we'll be switching towards networking mode. So we are just discussing in the couloirs. So I want you to give a warm hand to our guests once again.